was forced onto people there. And the brave early Muslims, not around 150, not more than 200 years ago, were exiled by the Protestants, and they called it making hijrah. And they were forced to live in swamplands, as I'm sure you know your history, and many of them died there. So because of their sacrifice today, may Allah Ta'ala bless them, that we have Islam in Uganda today. I'd like also to offer a moment of silence for George Floyd and his family. A reflection really of the Pan-African experience since slavery, and the recognition that pain and injustice began of this kind with slavery, but it has not ended with abolition. So I'm just going to, I think we should all just take a moment to remember the people who continue to pass through pain and are passing through pain because of that. Bismillah. So I'm going today to talk through a bit of my experience, firstly as a white person. Already I'm uncomfortable using that term, and we should go into why that's uncomfortable. A little bit about my early life, and then really all in reference to my experience as a white person in relation to race, in relation to how I saw it, how I saw myself in relation to other people, and then also ending on a reflection of the state of the Muslim community today, specifically in the United Kingdom, and where we're at in relation to that question. So when I was a child, I grew up in Hampstead. Many of you in the UK now will know Hampstead. It's a very nice suburb. And my father was a very well-known actor in the 1970s. His name was Anthony Booth. So we were broke at the time. My dad always said we weren't poor, we were broke. And I remember one day challenging him about that. I was 11 years old. And I looked in our cracked bathroom mirror, and at the you know, this not squalor, but it wasn't a great situation. And being a bit of a drama queen, I made myself cry, and I went and I reproached him. I said, "Dad, I'm tired of being poor." And I made my voice waver, and I made myself cry. And he, being an actor who much better than I was, just kind of looked at me, and he tilted his head and he said, "What makes you think we're poor?" And he broke down the reasons why we were broke and we weren't really living in poverty. And then he said something that stayed with me to this day. He said, "Listen, kid, you are not bad looking. You're quite clever. You're white. You live in Britain. You've already won the lottery of life. Don't you ever complain about where you started off, because you have every chance to make something of yourself." Subhanallah. That was the epitome, really, a taste of gratitude and an acknowledgement of the way that society worked. Now, I'm hoping if Brother Hamidullah may have a 1 or 2 minute clip that I'd like to offer up as part of our discussion today, of a program that my father did in the late 60s and 70s called Till Death Us Do Part, which really challenged the status quo on race in the United Kingdom at that time. Brother Hamidullah, can we cue that up? Can I get a response, anyone?
Yeah, I think Brother, Hamid is going to do that for us.
Okay, great.
Abu Jamal, can you do that for us, please? Or sister, you can share the screen and do it yourself if you want to.
No, I haven't arranged to do that. Sorry, I should have thought of doing that. But if it's too difficult, we don't have to share it. Okay, I can do it. Just give me 1 moment, no problem. Okay. Okay, here we go. So I'm just going to screen share and we're going to watch a couple of minutes of a show that ran in the 1970s. Let's see if I can screen share. Desktop 1, it has an exclamation mark. I don't know why. Let's see. Oh yeah, I haven't got this shared. Sorry guys. Shall we leave that and move on, Brother Hamid?
Yeah, we can. Zaid. Yeah, we can leave it and go on, and we can make you host. We can make you co-host, and you can share it.
No problem. We can come back to that later. The point was a simple one. Many BAME families were relieved to see the racist in the series, whose name was Alf Garnett, being mocked. He said terrible things about Black people, about Jews, about everybody of color at that time, but really specifically about Asian people and Black people. But did the sitcom work? Did allowing millions of households to hear that mockery actually change society? Because sometimes we want to rely on comedy to make us really evaluate our thoughts. Does satire actually change society? Well, from my dad's closeness to the discussion in the 1970s about race, I can say categorically at that time it did not. Unfortunately, what happened was that good old Alf, the racist, became an icon in British society. Gore, you told those foreigners, didn't you, Alf? The actor would have shouted to him in the road, much to the horror of the people who wrote the series. In the meantime, I had a liberal family life with my dad's house, my grandparents' house. They were in their 50s and 60s when I was a teenager. And my grandmother was a member of the National Front. Now, the reason that I'm going into this background, brothers and sisters, is because it's relevant to when we hear white people say, I never knew, or we don't discuss race in my house. Honestly, we have no opinion on race in my house. I can tell you that's a lie. Everybody, every family discusses race. The only question is to what degree it's linked to superiority. That's the only issue. In my experience with everybody that I've met, it is discussed, and everybody has some kind of awareness, ignorance, prejudice, preference, and opinion. So you don't ever have to think when somebody says, I've never thought about it, that that is true. My grandmother used to say, send them back, they don't belong here. And yet my two best friends, Angie and Tara, were of Afro-Caribbean and Irish descent. She loved them like grandchildren. She'd ruffle their hair and they'd come and stay weekends. And when I said to her, but you don't like Black people, she said, but they're different. They're like us. When I was 18, I started to go out with a young man called Robert. His family was originally from the Caribbean. My grandmother asked to meet him. I was pleased when she opened the Posh front room, the front room that we kids were never allowed to go in. I don't know if that was something you ever had, but there's a room where the grandmother never lets anybody go in. It's like waiting for the Queen to come. We'd never had anybody else shown into this room and given the best china. But Robert, my boyfriend, when he came round, my nan put on a very strange voice. Hello, how are you? Much posher than usual. And she took out the good china. She gave us cups of tea. And I thought, this is actually going quite well. This is not going to be a disaster. And then she turned to Robert and said, Robert, what tribe are you from? There was a moment's silence, and then Robert said, well, my family's been in Battersea for around 50 years, so I guess you'd say the South London tribe, Mrs. R. I wanted to strangle my grandmother. I could barely restrain my anger. I could feel Robert's hand on my back telling me, leave it. When we left, I said to him, why didn't we say something? Why didn't you let me say something That was an appalling thing to say, to presume that you're this, to presume. And he said, didn't she give me the good china cups? Didn't she show me into the posh front room? She did her best. Now, that was my first experience of what it means to have to let things go. My privilege meant that I could tackle things head on, not just with my family, but later on at work, in the office, with society as a whole. His color meant he had to put up with what little had been given and the insults, because she did then go on to talk about Haiti and voodoo and some totally bonkers stuff, which he had to sit and he dealt with so politely. It wasn't the first time I would see a person of color swallowing down what must have been a really uncomfortable experience. Age 17, I was studying for my A-levels. And one evening I was driving home to my grandmother's and I was extremely inebriated. And a policeman tried to flag me down in Hendon and I almost ran him over because I just didn't notice him. The siren went on behind me and I was pulled over by two policemen. They got out of their car and they said, "What do you think you're doing? Did you see that policeman?" I said, "Honestly, no." "What policeman?" They said, "The one that had to dive out of the road because you almost ran him over." What did I do? I got out the car and I burst into tears. Part genuine, I didn't want to lose my license, but mostly a little bit of acting, if I'm honest. I've got my exams tomorrow and I'm really nervous. And this is my grandfather's car. And if you take it from me, Do you know what happened next? I got a 2-car convoy to my grandparents' house, lights flashing, an escort by the police that I'd almost run over. Not long after that, I moved in with my boyfriend, and sometimes he'd borrow my car, and every single day he would come back with a story of being pulled over by the police. Why are you in that nice car? Whose car is it really? One day in Camden Town, he even had my car driven into by the police. I said, "Well, we're going to make a complaint." He said, "They told me not to. We won't be making a complaint." Again, I felt the anger because I could challenge things straight on. You go to the police station, you demand an explanation. It's my property. I didn't notice how he was dealing things, really. Did I maybe think he was a little bit cowardly? I mean, not standing up for himself? Why wouldn't you go to the police and challenge them? I gave him a bit of a hard time. It's my car that's got damaged, and you won't go to the police station? I had no understanding. I still didn't get it. The fury of prejudice that I saw around me in North London, it made me cry in frustration and disgust. I railed against my grandparents and I went on anti-racism marches, but I still accepted the premise of Britain and America and Europe being meritocracies. Meaning, of course, if you work hard enough, it doesn't matter what your background is, you can be like us. You can win in life like us, being the standard, being the Eurocentric worldview, being like white, like me. But I wouldn't have seen it like that, because at the end of the day, my whiteness has never existed until very recently. I would have said to anyone who said you're white, "How dare you? Excuse me, I'm not some generic color, you know. I'm British." Before Islam, this is. I would have said, "I'm British. I'm a Londoner. I'm a North Londoner." I'd have broke it down. But would I have said I'm white? Does anybody think of themselves like that? I faced some sexism as I grew into a young woman. As my dad had said, I was quite good looking and quite clever. When you're 6 foot, slim and blonde, the white machinery smiles upon you. So there is a level of sexism that you can actually make work for you. Didn't I flirt my way into certain jobs? Didn't I notice that editors kind of went, oh, what do you want us to do for you? That life was just that little bit easier, that I didn't like to queue jump, but wouldn't gentlemen say, and take the place here. And when I started to travel, how easy it was with a British passport, until it wasn't. How easy it was to, I've just realized something, and I'm going to share it because it's really pivotal. There is a thing going through customs, not to get in a line with too many dark-skinned people. If you're a white person, I would have said it to myself, but most people, some people even, I've heard it, oh God, look how many black people in this row, it's going to take ages. Because your experience of travel will not have been my experience of travel. But I never saw this as privilege. I knew that doors opened for me, and that was the universal way things worked. I knew seats were offered on trains. I knew that queues mysteriously shortened. And above all, as I began to travel, I found things very easily. In 2003, I moved to the south of France with my 2 children and husband. We wanted to make a new life for ourselves, and we quickly fell in with a group of expats. Heavy drinking, rugby playing, British expats, not really there to learn French or the French culture, because French are weird, right? But the expats of the kind who want to export their Englishness. Again, that superiority level, you know, the peak of human achievement is a whiteness, and then probably English whiteness, just a little bit up there, you know, just a little bit at the top. We sat down on one of the first nights, and I still remember this, in a taverna with our neighbors, trying to impress them. You know, you try and get in with your local friendship group. And I remember Bob and Jackie explaining why they'd left London. God, it's been taken over by foreigners. You wouldn't want to live there now. You barely see a white face in Southall. I began to feel uncomfortable. And then their golfing buddy said this. Yeah, but your black people can't help it, can they? They are born with the impulse to rape women and steal. I stood up, I looked at my husband, and I said, I'm not going to sit here with that kind of discussion. I'm disgusted. And I looked at my husband and expected him to stand up as well. Come on, that's an awful thing. You can't sit. He shook his head. Don't make a fuss. I went to the bar area on my own. This is what's called white solidarity. And when we're talking about race and values and changing society, we have to understand that what we are asking of white people is to break with solidarity. It's not an easy ask. Tears are not going to be enough this time. Marching and holding placards, we're your friends, we're with you, it's not going to be enough. It never was enough. But we're being asked to break with white solidarity. Later, my husband told me off for making a scene. Now, Robin Deangelo, who has written about white solidarity, has emphasized the importance of white people seeing ourselves in racial terms and acknowledging how our race has granted us power and privilege. Deangelo maintains whiteness stays centered in being unnamed and unmarked. And to decenter it, you have to expose it. Meaning, you have to reveal it. You have to call it out. I'd broken an unseen golden rule. I'd called out white solidarity. I had broken with it, and the neighbors never forgave me. And honestly, I think it was the starting point of the break in the marriage. So as I was having this awakening of I didn't want to be an expat, a little bit uncomfortable with what they're saying, I moved into recognizing the pain of the Palestinian struggle. And I joined an organization called the Free Gaza Movement in 2008. Again, this was before I was Muslim. I'd seen and read enough about Gaza to know that there was a great injustice being done. And I offered myself to a movement sending 2 ships from Cyprus in Europe to Gaza to highlight the siege that goes on to this day. I offered myself as a human shield. How was I going to be a human shield? Well, Tony Blair, as my brother-in-law at that time, was the envoy to the quartet in the Middle East. It would be very embarrassing. Again, talk about white solidarity. A little bit embarrassing to sink his sister-in-law in the Mediterranean. In fact, that whole movement was deliberately white so that the Israelis wouldn't blow us up. There was only one Palestinian on board. Everybody else was Australian white, British white, American white, and we were using our whiteness against white supremacy. If that's the game, if that's what it takes, let's do it. On a side note, there's something we need to be talking about. A report 2 years ago revealed that African women immigrating to Israel were subjected to mandatory contraceptive injections, effectively amounting to forced but temporary sterilization. There are some 130,000 Ethiopians, most of them Jewish, who live in Israel. The community experiences higher poverty and unemployment rates than the rest of the country's Jewish population. In the past decade, the birth rate among Ethiopian Israelis has declined by at least 20%. Advocacy groups now claim this decline is a result of a birth control regimen forced upon Ethiopian immigrant women. According to an article in Haaretz, an Israeli news source, one Ethiopian immigrant said that the doctors who injected her claimed people who frequently give birth suffer. While it's possible but unlikely that doctors genuinely had the woman's health in mind when they forcibly injected her with contraceptives, is that an excuse for depriving women of their reproductive choices? Israel has acknowledged the issue without admitting any wrongdoing, which in itself is a rather interesting and convoluted mind process, cognitive dissonance. We're not racist, but. By the way, on another side note, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said in a public speech that the arrival of non-Jewish African refugees is much worse for Israel than severe attacks by Sinai terrorists. Yes, Black people, by dint of their skin color, are terrorists in Israel. We can look now as well at the propensity that I've had to fight in myself to use tears. Not deliberately. At the end of the day, since being a Muslim, I'm a Scouse Muslim. Maybe you don't know, but Liverpudlians, from where my dad comes from, have very soft hearts. My dad used to sit and watch Little House on the Prairie and he would cry, "Oh my God, Pa." And as a Muslim, we have soft hearts, so we cry. And I'm in the menopause, so I cry. 3 very good reasons, but white women's tears are very potent. White women's tears are very potent. And we don't have the right to use them against causes or to avoid our own discomfort. I have to ask myself why I'm crying and what use it is now, particularly in the light of George Floyd. I just wanted to curl up in a ball and cry. I can't deal with slavery in any realistic form. But what use are my tears when I've had privilege? What good do they do to anybody except myself? White women's tears are very powerful. As Christian, a 57-year-old Harvard-educated science editor, found out when he was bird watching in a wooded area of Central Park in New York. He encountered a woman whose dog was running loose. He said, "Excuse me, Mom, but dogs in the ramble, the area, have to be on a leash at all times." And she said, "The dog's runs are closed." And he asked the woman, Amy Cooper, not to come close to him. And he started filming her. And he said, "It's interesting. I wasn't filming her because of a race thing. It's because I'm a birder. I'm interested in bird watching, and she's got a dog. She's a dog person." So what was actually happening at that moment in his mind was a conflict of animal life interests. But no, not for Amy Cooper. She was being aggressed by a black man, or was she? Did she really believe that? She called the New York police and said, "I'm going to tell them there's an African-American man threatening my life." She knew the power those words would have, and that's exactly what she did. Christian, the man, has told an interviewer she basically pulled the pin on the race grenade and tried to lob it at me. Had he not had the interaction recorded, would he even have lived to tell the tale? White tears have power. I learned to turn them off in refugee camps, though. When I started to go to Gaza and the West Bank, a friend who was a former soldier told me, "Don't you take your tears there and make it worse for them." I cry because I care, I say, but caring is not enough. White Fragility author and anti-racist educator Robin Deangelo describes a training within a company she gave. A black woman had shared her experiences of prejudice, perhaps for the first time. A white woman in the room started to cry, and when she was asked what the matter was by members of the group, she said, "I'm being made to feel that I'm racist and I don't like it." The men in the room flocked to her side. "You poor thing. Oh, don't cry. That's awful." And the black woman was left alone. Nobody comforting her for a lifetime of prejudice that she'd experienced. That's what happens when you call out the status quo. That was why my boyfriend wouldn't go to the police when they crashed into our car. That was why my boyfriend wouldn't pull my grandmother up when she talked about tribalism and voodoo. The work is uncomfortable for white people, and we need to acknowledge that in order to challenge it. My husband right now, he's Caribbean. He's an activist who's done his research on racism, institutionalized and internalized. He's called me out on several behaviors that I thought were okay. And I'm learning about the difference between intention and impact. Things that I say, I didn't intend that to be insulted. He will say, but the impact on the hearer is what's important, not what you intend. These are the languages and the lessons that we need to be pushing forward. Crying is not good enough, and charity is not an end goal. I don't know how much time I have left, and I don't want to take all of your group's time. I feel that I should move just briefly, at least, onto the Muslim experience. Okay. Any feedback? Should I stop now and take questions? What would you like me to do? Can I finish up on the Muslim community?
Yes, please.
Okay. 2 years ago, I went to the British Muslim Heritage Centre. I'm calling the institute out by name. The British Muslim Heritage Centre in Manchester, with a friend of mine of Caribbean heritage. There was in the room a series of Asian brothers and some Saudi guests. The Saudi guest began saying, Miss Booth, do you know anybody, any revert who might be interested in an exciting 2-year program to come and live in Saudi Arabia, learn the deen, we'll pay for everything, housing, car, food, family, flights, everything. We've got loads of budget. I looked at my friend and I knew that at that time she was struggling and that she knew many, many other sisters of Caribbean heritage who are converts, who are struggling. And my eyes lit up. Brilliant. Here we go. Yes, I do know some people. My friend, for example, her and her family might be interested. There was an embarrassed silence as the Egyptian heritage, Asian heritage, and Saudi heritage men looked confused. Which friend? My friend sitting here. She's a convert and maybe she could come on your program. He said, no. We mean British converts. She's British. Yes, my dear, but where is your mother from? She said she's British. Did your grandfather have a British passport? Yes. What about your great grandfather? And only then did it dawn on me. He meant white converts. There was nothing for British women or brothers of another descent. It was for white people. It was white Arab privilege meeting white British privilege and pretending it was Islam. And this does make me angry. So what I will say to the Muslim community is this. When we speak to Black people about race, don't let us dare use the Prophet's last sermon anymore as a panacea for inaction. Do we really think that Africans across that part of the world who have studied their deen, inherited their deen, 1,000 years of deen there, don't know the Prophet's last sermon? How patronizing is that? And if any of us here, our dear beloved Bilal radiallahu anhu, used an example to prove that we're not racist, it's a panacea. We are discrediting the name of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We are discrediting the memory of not just Bilal, but Abu Dar and Sumayya. How dare we use their names to force inaction? Because anti-tribalism in Islam is over. That's what it says. It was a historic thing. Wasn't it great at the time? But can we have somebody Black on our board now? No, don't be weird. Don't be weird. I'm going to conclude now. This is a moment of embarrassment. Racism isn't easy to brush aside right now. This is a moment. Is it the moment? I don't know, but it's a moment. And I've got some evidence of that. This week, my husband and I challenged 2 historic cases of prejudicial behavior from people within the Muslim community. I called out a comedian, an Asian comedian. He had done an appalling impersonation, a mockery of a Jamaican man on a stage 2 years ago. And I'd left with my daughter at the time and considered calling the police. So appalling was the behavior. And the all Asian audience, it was a British Asian comedy night, clapped and laughed when he said, my mum used to warn me that if I wasn't good, the blackface man would come and get me. Having lived in London, I now know what she meant. How they applauded and laughed. I went to the organizer and I demanded action. I promise you we'll do something. Shh, don't make a fuss, Lauren. I said, you promise, no, I'm not leaving here. Well, I returned. I never heard from the organizer or the comedian again, despite writing an article and contacting them. And the comedian has apologized. He's going to do work with a friend of his on race. He's going to speak about it in public. Alhamdulillah. And my husband had an article he wrote about 2 black figures in the Muslim world, and it was taken down off a major Muslim news website because it was seen as, what was the word? Divisive. Because it was challenging. That's now being reversed, and that article is out right now. So people are in a dilemma. I hope things won't be swept under the carpet. Is there actual hope? It really depends on a host of factors. But now there are white people and Muslim Pakistanis, inshallah, willing to be allies. But together we need to hold everybody, myself included, figures and organizations, to the promise that we have made. Thank you. May Allah forgive us and guide us. Ameen.
Thank you, Sister Lorraine. That was a fantastic speech you've given us. A question from me before anyone asks. I think our viewers, the audience would like to know, what prompted you? What made you become a Muslim?
What made me become a Muslim? It was interaction with the Muslim community in Palestine, and the ideals of fairness and goodness that I saw, and of course a belief in one God rather than the Trinity. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. We've got hands. Let's take the first hand. Brother Abu Jamal, you have the mic, please. You can ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Sister, this is Hamidullah. You've been communicating with. I'm sorry that it didn't come out as we had organized. I was somewhat busy and I was not 100% optimized, but so we couldn't show the clips. But alhamdulillah, jazakallah khaira, we're very grateful for your input, and we hope that you continue working with us in one way or another. We have a lot of plans, inshallah, to build the Muslim Ummah. And I think from what we can see, your understanding of things is our understanding of things, alhamdulillah. We kind of aware of your project, and would like you to tell us about your projects. What else you do? Do you have any books? Do you have any other? Yeah. Please.
Thank you very much. That's a very kind question. I wrote a book about my experience as a spiritual being from Christianity to Islam and to living as a Muslim. It's called Finding Peace in the Holy Land. You can get it Kindle version now, but if you'd like to buy, they're only available via myself at the moment. We're putting them on Amazon Marketplace soon. But if you would like to arrange a visit or a talk or to get a copy, then you need to contact me. I will give my email address. I'll actually give a website address as well, and you can find out more there. That was turned into a play, and a one-woman play which I wrote with Mohammed Sese, and we performed that 30 times at the world's largest arts festival in 2019. It's called Accidentally Muslim. It's a one-woman show. I play 19 characters. It's an hour long, and it's full of pivotal moments and realizations for people of faith and no faith, inshallah. And that's available for tour, inshallah, if things can be done with social distancing, of course, although a lot of it's online. So that's available as well. And I currently produce a show called Tayyib Way, Tayyib Way, Tayyib Way, for Salam Initiative on YouTube. And it's about how to be more environmentally aware of our Islamic duties and to live a better ethical life, inshallah. And that can be found on YouTube.
Jazakallah khaira for that. We're going to be sharing these links on our channels. We have a couple of channels. What we see here on this conference is not all that is happening. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, and we are moving bit by bit. We need everyone on board. And inshallah, we're going to be sharing a lot of content throughout our channels, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Inshallah. Thank you again. I'm going to be available. I'll stay on board for another 10 minutes for Q&A. And I can also type some contact details into the chat if anybody would like to find them there, inshallah.
Inshallah. We have another hand, Sister Lauren. Prince, yes, Brother Jafar, you have the mic, please. You can ask your question. Brother Jafar, unmute yourself, please. Maybe it's a mistake.
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Who am I speaking to?
Are you talking to Prince here, Central London?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam to Allah barakat. Thank you so much for this sharing us with all experience you had in your life. So basically, my question is, since you became a Muslim, what changes have you seen in your life and your families and friends? You still have your friends since you became a Muslim. What challenges when you came up and say, I'm a Muslim now? How did you discover the Islam?
So what I'm going to do, brother, is as we're talking about white privilege today, I'm going to, if you don't mind, focus a little bit on privilege and the experience of losing that to a degree. What I've noticed from that side is that my daughters really struggled with the Asian community as young women because, unfortunately, even in Muslim schools, there is an understanding that Asian Islam is the real Islam and everybody else is just tinkering around the edges. And they faced a lot of prejudice. They were sidelined and ignored. And eventually, my youngest daughter refused to go anymore to the Islamic school. My eldest daughter said that she noticed that the behavior of non-Muslims in the school she went to was actually better towards her in many ways than the Muslim community. And that's really, really sad. And we can see what a drain that would be on, and you know, again, still from a position of white privilege, while the adults lauded us and applauded us and, you know, made us into icons, I would be noticing my Caribbean sisters and Hindu sisters who came to Islam as well, people of color, being completely ignored, not having access to support, their stories are not interesting, and really, really struggling because the mainstream, they don't want to go to the mainstream. They are Muslims. They deserve our help and support, and really facing catastrophic prejudice. I heard it described by Boona Muhammad. His experience in America was with his children. He and his wife had to discuss, do we want our kids to face a prejudice from Muslims in a Muslim school or from white people in a mainstream school? And the considerations were to do with, well, if they see Muslims behaving badly, it's actually going to negatively impact their deen. Whereas if it's white people in the mainstream, then they've still got their deen. And that is a really sad reality. I think I've seen a great deal of beauty, subhanallah, and you know, people trying to get close to Allah Ta'ala. And I have a newfound respect for different ways of life. Freer from an inherent sense of superiority myself. And I think really, perhaps for any soul, it's the humbling of the nafs, the humbling of the ego, that's the most important journey that we go on.
How could we change that? How can we change that behavior? As you see that you go to, you find that most of us will become more racist to a Muslim to other Muslims when they go, like you take your kids to Muslim schools, and you find that the Muslim themselves, the way they behave towards other Muslim, how can we change that? That we can learn our deen, not look into people's color or things that the Islamic is one culture, maybe Bangladesh or Pakistan. How can we change that as a community in UK?
So I think I would cordially suggest for your consideration that your organizations approach all the Muslim schools and the main Muslim organizations and demand to be heard. We have issues, we'd like to be heard. And seminars are not enough. Like I say, people are very embarrassed now about being called racist. Before, it would be seen if a black person had a complaint, oh, they're playing the race card, and it can be, oh, you know, they're being a bit noisy, oh, it's a bit aggressive. But now, if you know, real complaints are being listened to, and I'm not saying there weren't real complaints before, go and make them. What is your diversity program? What is your project for advancing Black voices in your organization? How will you guarantee that my child will not face prejudice? Can I get that in writing? But it has to be done at organization level. Individuals can do it, but no. And seminars are not enough. Offering a seminar on Bilal, just say that's insulting. That is insulting.
Thank you so much, sister. So we're gonna work hard to make sure that we teach our kids, because we have challenges, our kids as well. Once they go to those, even though if they go to the mosques, you're going to find those racism, the way they see in the mosque, because they see you as not a part of them, because they bring culture into the way they see it. They just take into their culture. But how are we going to do it as a Ugandan community to our kids that not have that that behavior whenever they go to such a mosque and there's schools and seminars, and you see that you look at you as a different person. So how are we going to do as a Ugandan community? What advice would you give us? Again,
What's been shown to work is be organized and be vocal and be noisy and be willing to call people out. If you can't get the meetings, I know what's happened, and people are tired. And I say this with respect. I can say this with energy because it's not something I've dealt with day in, day out. So I know I come across as belligerent. It's easy, just go in and do this. That's my experience. All right. You may go to people in your community and they're like, I'm tired. I tried with that school over 10 years. Will you leave me alone? I don't know how to overcome that exhaustion. I can only understand it from a distance. But if you're not exhausted, for those who feel energized in this moment, organize, call it out, demand recognition.
Thank you, sister. It's a shame what your daughters had to go through. The Muslim schools, subhanallah, but we know they have a strong mother that can always advise them accordingly. May Allah
bless you, please. Thank you so much. But let's just recognize that they've had a great deal of privilege as well. So it's not a comparative thing. At the end of the day, you know, we've also been lionized and applauded in a way that other people haven't, and we recognize that as well.
Okay, so we have another hand. Sheikh Qasim.
Just a quick comment. a quick interjection, Brother Zaid. Members, if you raise up your hand, please ask one question. The presenter has probably 5-10 minutes before she leaves, and everybody needs to be heard. Can you please just ask one question and then, give other members a chance to ask?
Naam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. My name is Qasim Jumba from Boston, Massachusetts, United States of America. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, and thank you for making that decision. Now, my question is, what are the challenges that you faced when learning on how to practice Islam, like the prayer and the wordings, the pronunciations? And part B of the same questions, do you really try to encourage your friends or make them love the same religion that you chose? Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Qasim. I'm happy to answer these questions on another group at another time. What we're really focusing on today is the experience of prejudice within and external to our community. So I don't want to necessarily focus on myself at this time, but I'm more than happy to talk about that another time if you're good enough to invite me, inshallah.
Inshallah.
You'll be invited, sister. Definitely, you'll be invited again, inshallah. Let's have another hand then. Brother Khan.
Brother Fazil. Assalamu alaikum.
Okay. Brother Khan.
Yes, hi, assalamu alaikum, Sister Khan, sorry.
Sister Khan, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, sister. Absolutely.
Walaikum salam.
Thank you for all what you just actually spoken about. It actually touches quite deep down because I'm from up north and I know what racism is and I know what white privilege can do. I'm going to make it very quick because I know you've got a lot of people waiting for you. My only question is that white privilege is also, please don't take this offensive, but reverts and converts are actually put on another pedestal when it comes to reverts. If they're white privilege reverts, I've noticed they've also get a higher. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? I don't want to offend anyone, but they're more seen and then more highlighted. Now I see that also as a white privilege within Islam and Muslims. And so how do we get? I'm trying myself anyway. I've been talking to my community, but how? I know it has to be Islam. We have to teach ourselves true Islam to eradicate this kind of mentality. But do you see what I'm trying to say? Is that it exists even with reverts as well?
Sister, I thank you so much. I completely and totally acknowledge what you're saying. And it's not for me to acknowledge, it is for friends who have told me their experiences of that. It would be ridiculous to sit here and say that that is not the case. Again, also, I've noticed that convert groups get funding when they're led by white converts, as if there's, again, it's like there's levels of Britishness.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, because on the one hand, I would tend to say, well, look, you know, we're British, we know how to run things, but are we more British than the British people of Caribbean heritage? They don't know how things work here. I don't think that's not an excuse, and yet somehow pivotal in the mind. So handing over authority, this is the work that's going to be uncomfortable, because to bring people forward, somebody has to concede and step back. But keep calling it, keep demanding a voice to be heard, a group to be created, certain specific issues to be related, and again, not just Bilal, you know, real issues right here and right now to be heard. So I acknowledge that completely. And
thank you, sister. Jazakallah. Take care of yourself, darling.
Take care, Habib.
Alhamdulillah.
I think Brother Fazil has his hands up. Brother Fazil, Assalamu alaikum. Can you unmute yourself? Can't unmute yourself. Okay. Who's Brother Organizer? Can we hear from Fazil? Assalamu alaikum.
Fazil needs to unmute himself now.
Oh, you can unmute yourself now, Fazil.
There we go. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, nephew. How you doing?
Okay, how are you, Auntie?
All right, darling. All right.
Right. So my question is, as a white woman, do you feel as if though becoming a Muslim, your white privilege has lessened through your experience? Within Britain in general, do you think you've been looked down upon any more, any less, as because now you wear a headscarf, for example? Yeah,
that's a brilliant question. I've you know, I was speaking earlier about going to at airports that you just go, I've got a British passport, the Queen signed my passport, and you just breeze through. Well, you know, since 9/11, I've been, and since 2010, when I came to Islam, believe me, having a hijab has been really difficult, you know, as it is for all sisters. I remember in New York one time, there was a member of Homeland Security who took me out of the queue, and my daughters used to get upset. They were like 8 and 10 years old. Oh, Mummy, why? I said, don't worry. It's just, you know, when I used to get frisked by women, I'd say it's a free massage they give me every time I come through. It's amazing. Again, you know, the coping strategies. Do you make a joke of it? Do you laugh about it? But this particular time I was annoyed, and I said to the gentleman at Homeland Security, I said, you're taking every woman in a headscarf out of the queue. You know that. You know that's racist, right? And he was Afro-American, and he said, are you calling me a racist? I said, well, you've got prejudice. He said, explain yourself. I said, if I said to you, every black man in that queue has a knife, would that be prejudice? He said, hell yeah. I said, you're treating every woman in hijab like she has a bomb. What's the difference? And he said, the difference is you're not getting on that plane. And I had to fight to get on the plane that day. It was only Allah Ta'ala brought somebody along and went, oh, you're on TV. Yeah, let her through. Otherwise, I was not getting the plane that day for raising discrimination. And you know, but again, these are small things that I'm only saying I put into context. This praising Allah, believing in the oneness of Allah, has downgraded my white privilege. And my daughters and I do joke about this. You know, if only we'd known how to use it properly. You know, you don't, you know, as Joni Mitchell said, you don't know what you have till it's gone. Yeah. We kind of joke about white privilege in that way, but it's not gone because we've taken it with us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Faz.
Sister Mindy from Morocco.
Hi, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
I joined your live stream slightly half an hour late, but I joined you at the point when you were talking about your Caribbean, was it Jamaican Caribbean friend? And
not Jamaican, but from one of the islands.
Yeah. So actually, it's more of like a comment on my thoughts on what I've heard everyone saying, and I just like to hear more of your thoughts because I missed the first half of your talk. I'm a British revert Muslim of Asian origin, and I actually live in Morocco now. And my experience as a British Muslim, having grown up, being raised, educated, worked basically my whole life there, once I started wearing the hijab, I mean, I've lived in France as well, so it was the racism was very stark, very obvious when I was in France. But when I moved back to the UK, it was very subtle. But I noticed it a lot more once I was wearing the hijab, because I'm actually, although I'm Asian, I'm actually quite fair-skinned. So as an Asian, no one can really tell. Am I Indian, Asian, whatever? So they get confused. And I found there was this kind of, I felt like I didn't belong anywhere. You know, in a masjid, I didn't feel like I fitted in with a group at the masjid because they were all kind of like Pakistani, Bangladeshi. And then feeling the racism from the white community as well. You know, getting comments like, oh, your English is very good. Where are you from? And it's so patronizing that people would say that and not realize that the Asian community has been there for so many years, and that they have had children growing up there. And, you know, the whole situation is so absurd. And now we've reached this point where, you know, we're having to call it out even more. And I'm really grateful for everything you've said, because there was a comment about how a white revert, a Muslim, would get more attention, more highlight and opportunities to present Islam, as opposed to an ethnic minority, person of color, revert Muslim. So I would just like to hear more of your thoughts around that, again, because I missed the first half of your talk. And Jazakallah khairan. I mean, I live in Morocco now, and I feel more at home here in Morocco than I do in the UK, because everything that, you know, we've experienced. My husband's Moroccan, and my children are mixed race, Muslim, and I fear for them. You know, just traveling, I fear traveling now, going to the UK. Oh, how am I going to be treated at the airport? Are we going to get stopped and searched? And, you know, are we going to, if you understand what I'm saying? So I'd just like to hear more of your thoughts again from what you've said previously before I joined, and on everything.
Thanks, Mindy. It's lovely to hear from you. May Allah Ta'ala bless you. And yeah, the difficulties of being a minority within a minority within a minority should be, you know, people should be made aware of it. But I'd actually like to put a spotlight on the fact that because we're talking about white privilege today, and we're talking specifically because of what's happened recently about the experience of the Black community, and I'd like us to stay focused on that, if that's okay. What I noticed coming to Islam was and entering the British Muslim community is that there is a hierarchy there, and it's Asian Muslims, white Muslims, everybody else. And I think that's, you know, then racism gets blamed on colonialism, and colonialism is a great excuse for our Asian brothers and sisters. And I'm going to ask you a question, actually, Brother Fazil, because I think it'd be really good to get your perspective on this. We can blame, you know, our Pakistani brothers and sisters say, well, it's the colonialists' fault if we're racist, and we're not racist because we're not white. And that allows an implementation of racism at systemic levels in all our organizations. Fazil, I wonder about conversations that you've heard. Honestly, could share with us now.
Yeah.
Attitudes to Black people that you've heard expressed in your community.
So I actually had this conversation with my uncle the other day. So the protests were going, we were watching the protests on the news, and my uncle quite ignorantly said, I just don't understand. It's just one person in America. This whole hoo-ha is happening over. And I looked at him, he's Pakistani, from Pakistan, that came to England. And I said to him, well, are you not recognizing that it's a bit more than just one person in America that this is all about? And I spoke to him about the fact that I said, are you not also realizing that this may also affect you as a minority, that this whole movement, it's about Black Lives Matter, but at the same time, are you not able to, at any level, able to sympathize or understand what this movement is about, being a person of color yourself? And he kind of essentially said, well, it seems like it's all good, all well and good that everyone's talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, but what about the people in Palestine? What about these other things that are happening in the world? And I kind of said, well, you can't make those two comparisons. It's two completely different things to talk about. And I said, have you ever noticed how you speak about Black people? And he said, what do you mean? So we've recently bought a house in London, and it's in a very multicultural area. Our neighbours are Black, and you will know that within the Asian community, we call white people gore and black people gala, which is broken down to this idea of literally the names of what the color is, black and white. But the way that people then within the Asian community, I've noticed, speak about, especially the black people within our community, is actually it's disgusting. It's come to the point now where, so for example, my uncle didn't seem too keen on the area. He said, "Oh, there's a lot of Gali here," and I said, "Right, and what's your point?" And there was no point. It was just a thing that he's conjured up in his head, that where there's black people, there's going to be more problems. It's going to be rougher. It's going to be this. It's going to be that. There's going to be issues there. And then I said to him, "Have you ever thought about that being racist?" And he said, "Well, I'm not a racist." No. I said, "Well, how? How is that not racist?" He said, "Because," he goes, "I have people of different faiths. He owns a shop in Manchester. He says, I have people of different faiths that come to my shop. There's these black ladies that come from the local church, and we have conversations about our religion and on one-to-one basis. I'm not," but I said, "But on a generalized view of life, do you not feel as if what you are saying is prejudice, racist, and you essentially look at black people lower by using words such as gala and saying," and it's never in a positive way. It's always, "Oh, look, there's all these gala here. Oh, look," do you know what I mean? So it's always in a sense of that superiority thing. So what I was trying to get him to understand was this idea that, yes, it's not always, it's a case of us as Muslims understanding that we are effectively all the same. And yes, on the level of Islam, you might not think that you're a racist, because if you're a Muslim regardless of your color. But on a cultural level, from where you're from...
Brother Fazil, can you just wind up?
Yes, sorry. On a cultural level, from where you're from, it seems as if though there is definitely some level of I'm better than you, or you are less than me, or you are a certain type of person because of the color of your skin.
Thanks, Fazil. That's really honest, and I appreciate that. I guess the question for yourself and your family, who are very, hooked into that community and popular and connected, is what's the next steps to actually challenge it? I mean, breaking with, I said I had to break with white solidarity in the Muslim community to break with Asian solidarity to actually open these conversations isn't easy. But, to challenge places like the British Muslim Heritage Centre to really make those changes, and all of our organisations to avoid systemic continuation of prejudice, that's going to be for your generation, and you're going to have to push for it, inshallah.
Sister, we have one more question from Sister Sarah. We'll give you one more question, I think. Okay. Sister Sarah, unmute yourself, please.
Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sister, what I wanted to address was, I think what's really hit me, first of all, I'm Black and I'm Muslim, but I feel like by being Muslim and Black, it's like double trouble, if anybody understands what I mean. But I think what I've understood since this whole George Floyd issue going on, is how much lack of awareness is there among Muslims themselves, and how much we Black people are also not aware of how much we need to voice what struggles we go through. For example, I'm in Manchester, and my daughter goes to a predominantly Asian Muslim school, and even just going to pick her up, you feel the parents like seclude themselves, and these are Muslims, and they have like different circles whereby you feel you're out of place. And another issue is I have a friend who, one of my husband's friends, recently went to ask for a hand in marriage to a Somali family. But the mother was appalled, because what she goes to her daughter is, "Oh, he's too Black for you," because she feels he is too black for her daughter. And I've had different conversations with different individuals since the George Floyd thing, and people are like, okay, but there's justice now. Why are people still talking? But people don't understand the struggle that is still there, to the point that you're going to the shops and the way people look at you. Let me say you're in Asda, you're shopping, but the way people look at you, or you're at the till, you're paying because I'm wearing a niqab, how they have to accentuate everything they're saying as if I do not understand English. And it's on such a high level. So what my question is, how are we going to bring this kind of awareness out there for people to understand that this movement has brought us issues that are far deeper than just the death of one black man? There's so many struggles we go through every day, and they make you feel small. And then your child asks you a question and your heart breaks because you do not know how to address this kind of questions with your child.
So I've got a, thank you, sister. I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
What do you think the response would be if you went to the head of the Muslim school and said, I'm concerned that outside this school, no one is mixing with myself or other black sisters. I'm afraid that my daughter may be struggling with prejudice in a majority Asian school. And I really want us to have a discussion about this and take some steps forward. Do you feel too exhausted to do that? Do you feel like, or do you feel empowered right now? Do you feel able to do it? Do you have an expectation of action if you do that?
To be honest with you, I never felt I could address it because I felt they would just be like, oh, there they go again, bringing up their privilege. Do you understand where I'm coming from? So I never, yes, so I never felt I was able to go and raise that. What I was playing on my cards, I was thinking maybe I should move her to maybe another school that is necessarily not Muslim, maybe that has more people of her race, so she feels more confident in her race and who she is. So these issues are there, but I think what actually breaks my heart is how little we recognize, we as Muslims and we as people of different color recognize that there's actually such a big problem, to the level that people are thinking, oh, why is there so much noise about the movement now? But people don't understand it's the pain. It's years of going through say. And what breaks my heart is people don't even the people who are being abused themselves racially, they do not recognize that it's abuse no more. It's become a known.
So do you see this as potentially a moment for you personally? I mean, this, I think from the outside, the exhaustion comes from trying to deal with everything. You know, is that, you know, you're pounded by everything and personal experience.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
The concern for your daughter, though, I personally, and again, I'm not in your shoes. Again, I haven't had to deal with what you're dealing with. Use this moment. The school may now be ready to review its behavior.
Yeah.
Right. One of my daughters went to a mainstream school, and she experienced a moment when a girl tried to kiss her in a play, and she said, I'm not going to do that. It's not necessary. She said, is it your stupid face that's making you do that? She came home to tell me, right, this is a white school. And I went, oh, hell no, right? I took it up with the headmistress. Do you know what they did? They almost shut the school. The inquiry was so massive, right? But in a Muslim school, it gets brushed under the carpet. And, you know, I didn't have to push. The doors were open. They were ready. They were ready for that Muslim voice. So there's two things going on here. One, you know, is the fact that probably I'm a journalist. Number two is the fact that they were ready to hear from a white kid in a headscarf, bit weird, but Muslim, got to be more sensitive. I'm hoping that this may be a moment when a sensitivity comes into Islamic schools, like, don't let's brush this under the table. Don't let's make these all Asian schools. instead of Muslim schools? Because honestly, some of the schools should just call themselves the Asian school with a bit of Islam thrown in, rather than an Islamic school or an Arab school. What do you think, sister?
Sister, I think has gone off.
Okay.
Barakallahu fikum for the time. I think we've run short of time. We've gone into the next presenter's time.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, you don't have to apologize because we're enjoying it. We feel privileged. We feel happy that we've managed to host you. You accepted our invitation on behalf of Ummah Connect, Soul Cocktail, and THURAYYA Media. Would like to invite you again, and then, you know, give you probably a longer session than this, because I think most of us want to listen to you. Brother Zaid, please help.
Yes, Sister Lorraine, it has been a wonderful presentation from you. Jazakallah khairan. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase his blessings and provisions upon you and your family.
Ameen.
And everyone around you, and elevate your status in the hereafter. We are so privileged to have you, sister, so privileged. I think in advance, I'll ask you in advance that you will be to accept our invitation in a few weeks to come, because everyone would love to hear more from you, inshallah. Would like to give us your last remarks, inshallah, as we go into another session, inshallah.
So don't lose hope. There is a change in the air. Gather together, gather your strength, whatever energy you have left. The fight is real and it's ongoing. You don't have to accept bad treatment anymore. People are feeling ashamed. And that shame should be turned into positive behaviors and instead of fear. And please do take up your matters with all the Muslim organizations in the United Kingdom and make sure your voice is heard. You can contact me at info@kcmedia.co.uk. And if this is recorded, please do send it to me. I'd like a copy of it to share across my channels. And anything that I can do, inshallah ta'ala, I'll be happy to be a part of your conversations in the future. Allah ta'ala bless you. Jazakumullah khair. And may Allah give us the best in this life and the next. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi